Welcome to the Romance Fiction Club, where different romance authors come together to share their romance works. If you think our library is missing a romance genre you love, please let us know in the comments. We will do our best to make that content available. Please subscribe to the channel so we can keep creating free audiobooks for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for being with us, and have a wonderful listening.
This content is adapted in order to comply with YouTube's safe content guidelines and regulations. If you wish to read the full text containing all the steamy scenes, you can download the full unedited book from the link available in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy your audiobook.
Beachside Lover. A bad boy sports romance written by USA Today Bestselling author Andy Wayne. Chapter 1. The air smelled like seaweed and salt water as it rolled over the sand. Elena didn't know how she knew what the ocean smelled like, having never smelled it before, but somehow she recognized it when she stepped off the gate and found herself standing in the middle of a crowd. People were pushing past one another, sidestepping between couples, and dodging little kids attached to their mothers' hands. It was overwhelming. There was no place for Elena to stand and absorb her surroundings. She would have very much liked to stand back out of the fray and just watch, taking it all in. This was her first time visiting the Pacific coast, and even the airport could have offered her a little bit of distraction. Instead, she was forced to follow the stampede and struggled to make her way to the conveyor belt where her luggage was on display for anyone who felt like taking it. She sifted through the navy blue and black wheeled suitcases until she found hers and snatched it up. Then she walked back into the crowd. Her phone started vibrating as soon as she found the exit, but she couldn't answer it because she was sandwiched between two men the size of sumo wrestlers. She couldn't even reach into her pocket. Elena figured she would just call him back, but by the time she had squeezed herself out the door and into the parking lot, he had already called 4 times. "What?" she answered, a hint of irritation in her voice. "Where are you?" Tripp sounded upset. "I told you, I'm in Ocean Beach. I took a job out here." "You never told me. I drove all the way down to your house this morning. The lights were off and the blinds wide open. It was completely cleared out. Are you leaving me, Elena?" "No, I'm not leaving you. I put my stuff in storage because I knew I was going to be gone for a while." "Tripp, I've been telling you about this for the past 3 months. You never listen. Half the time you interrupted me before I even started to tell you. You'd think that if you were so worried about me leaving you, you'd listen to what I have to say." She dodged out of the way, barely avoiding a man pushing a luggage cart the size of a smart car. "So you are leaving me. I knew it. You didn't even have the decency to tell me to my face. Instead, you just disappeared. After everything we've been through, you ran off without saying a word. I'll be back, Tripp. I love you, and I want to be with you, okay?" She used a softer voice, hoping he would listen. "You can't deny you're unhappy. We've been fighting for years. I want to be with you. Just say it, Elena." "Do you want me to break up with you, Tripp? I mean, it sounds as if you do. You didn't even listen to me when I tried to tell you I was leaving town. You literally tuned me out for the past 3 months. I told you I was leaving yesterday. And what was your response?" "Okay, baby," she mocked him. "Are you leaving me, Elena?" "No. But you want to get away." "I need to. It's not because of you." "Yes, it is," he countered. "You're right. It is," she said as she started walking to the line of cabs next to the curb. "I love you, Elena." "I love you too, Tripp." "All right." He hung up, sounding disappointed. "Hey!" Elena turned to her right at the sound of the voice and saw there was a taxi driver staring at her. "You need a ride?" "Sure. Could you open the back?" He popped the trunk and let her in. "Where to?" "Big One Arena, please." "Got it." The freeway was a death trap. The only way they were able to get through the gridlocked traffic was by dodging back and forth between lanes, and there were a couple of times when Elena was certain they were going to sideswipe somebody. She didn't know how she was going to survive on roads like this. It was a good thing she had decided to wait a bit before she rented a car. Otherwise, she might have killed herself the second she left the exit ramp. When they finally got back onto the city streets, Elena sat back and closed her eyes. She didn't really feel like going into the office right away. She wanted to get a hotel and lay down for a couple hours. But that wasn't going to happen. Tripp was in her head screaming. Her heart was still racing from the death race on the freeway, and all she could think about was how unfair he was being. He didn't have to put so much pressure on her. She really did love him. Of course they fought. They were a couple. It would be impossible for them to live a peaceful existence when they were spending so much time together. That was the problem. If she just got away for a little while, it would give her the time she needed to treat him the way he deserved. She wouldn't be so tense, so angry with him all the time. It seemed like everything he did bothered her these days, and he felt the same way about her. He was still the one. He would appreciate her and take care of her. She wouldn't have to work. She could start a family and raise her kids in a wonderful home. She wouldn't have to worry about whether or not she'd have food or the money to buy the things they needed. Tripp would make sure that her life was easy. Elena didn't want to give him up, but he was distant. They would go out to eat, and he'd look at everything but her. He'd mindlessly nod his head and smile while she was talking, but she knew that he was never listening. Sometimes she'd say funny things to catch him, and he would just acknowledge what she was saying without even noticing. The spark was gone, and she wasn't sure they were going to get it back. She wasn't even sure she wanted it back. She wanted the life he had to offer, but she didn't want the man he was becoming. Elena wanted a relationship based on something real, passion and trust. Because they had been seeing each other so long, it seemed they'd gotten comfortable. Complacent. Elena didn't want to be comfortable. She wanted to move forward and be a part of something real. The arena's black steel structure came into sight long before they reached it. It was sitting high above the rest of the city, on the top of a hill bordering the coast. A man-made monolith filled with brightly covered screens and light towers. It seemed unnatural against the beautiful coastal backdrop. She hated sports, especially football. In her mind, it was an antiquated tradition that only served to suck up money and attract filth. She wanted as little to do with it as possible, but she needed the job. She made a living taking out the trash, fixing marriage scandals, bad hair days, and all-around craziness, so public figures and businessmen could look good in front of a camera. The problem was that people out in the Midwest where she lived weren't all that picky about their public figures. They were too busy with the daily grind to care. So her image consulting firm was tanking, and she wasn't making it. So she had broadened her horizons and wound up where her services would be needed the most. The West Coast was a haven for celebrities and their drama. Everyone was in the tabloids, and if they weren't, they were trying to be. Ocean Beach was the perfect place for her to revitalize her career. Elena found her way to the private entrance in the back of the arena and followed a series of empty corridors until she came to the elevator that would take her to the top floor. The place was rugged. There were no frills, no decorations, just bare steel and black-painted walls. They didn't even bother to fix the paint that had worn away around the elevator buttons. Elena wanted to challenge herself, and she believed that working with athletes was the best way to do that. If she could make these would-be felons the size of apes look good, then she could make anyone look good. The elevators opened up to a long reception area with posters lining the walls and a row of cheap metal chairs sitting under them. It reminded her of a run-down old dive bar that couldn't afford tables and booths. The only thing that set it apart was the young woman sitting at the reception desk wearing a white shirt that barely covered her chest, and enough makeup to paint the Mona Lisa. "Hi." Elena's heels clicked against the tile floor. "Hello?" When the receptionist looked up from her phone, Elena could tell there wasn't much happening behind her blank stare. "I have a meeting with Chance in 10 minutes. "Watch," she laughed. Then she turned toward the back and door and leaned back in her chair. What are we watching for? Elena asked, curious. Just wait. She folded her legs and smiled. The door shot open and hit the wall behind it, lodging the doorknob into a hole in the wall. Elena stepped back. The man that emerged was a model of pure, unadulterated anger, packed into a tight Latino package. What? He cocked his head to the side and trained his eyes on her. He was clearly imbalanced. Elena was worried he'd run up and slam her to the ground. He could do it. The man had arms the size of tree trunks and a body like a bear. Dread rushed down her spine and settled in her gut. She was in danger, but there was nothing she could do about it. She waited while he stared at her, terrified that he would hurt her, but he didn't. Instead, he walked past with a cocky smile and shook his head. Chapter 2. Before Elena got a chance to ask the receptionist what was going on, Chance, the team's manager, called out to her from his office. "Elena," he said jovially, "come on in." She got the sense that this was a man in control, capable of passing through different worlds, like circles of athletes and those of well-groomed investors. It was his confidence, perhaps, and the way he had his feet up on his desk with a sly smile. He was casual, wearing a graphic tee with his auburn hair messed up and a pair of sandals to go along with his torn jeans. She imagined him with a surfboard leaning against the wall of a luau hut, drinking a beer. When she walked in, he said, "You can close the door." Then he motioned for her to sit down. She did. Diego Rojas is the lowest form of life I've ever come into contact with. Do you know what he did? Of course I do. He knocked up one of the Hawk ladies and now he's refusing to take responsibility for it. Everyone knows about it and it's causing a huge scene. In my opinion, any man that could leave a woman after getting her pregnant doesn't deserve to exist, much less father a child. Chance put his feet down and leaned in. Those women are the reason why people come to this arena. They don't care about the game. They just want to see the girls bend over. Maricela was one of our best. Everyone knows who she is. She's as big as he is. Now that they know what he did to her, women everywhere are burning their bras in her honor, and it's killing out ticket sales. I lost 4 sponsors this morning, and Diego could give a shit. This isn't going to be easy. I don't think people want to listen to him. They don't. Bottom line is damage control. Keep him in line. Teach him to talk to the press like he has more than a 3rd-grade education, and we'll do our best to keep her low-key. It won't be enough, she added. If we can keep this controlled while you work on giving him a better image, we might be able to avoid the worst of it. The media cycle was slow. They didn't have much to talk about. It could take a long time for them to move on from the story. She wasn't looking forward to this assignment. Oh, you'll be meeting Diego tonight. The team does charity work regularly. It helps bring in sponsors and it keeps the players occupied with something other than drugs and pussy. We're having a fundraiser for an African Children's Foundation and Diego is required to attend. It would be a great chance to corner him and maybe have a few drinks. Okay. Great, he said as he stood up to show Elena out. Give Chelsea your hotel information. He stopped at the door and Elena watched as he undressed her with his eyes. This is a red carpet event. Of course, she replied. The man was a pig. Perfect. He slapped her on the back playfully. I'll pick you up at 6. He gave her one last sickening look before he closed the door. Elena hovered around the reception desk while the girl fawned over the slab of bleached blonde beef leaning over the counter. They were talking quietly, smiling and giggling. Elena couldn't make out what they were saying, but judging by the intensity of their looks, she had a pretty good idea. She cleared her throat. Oh, hi. Chelsea reacted with a high-pitched explosion of energy. Hi. How was it? The man stared at Elena indignantly. He was probably upset that she interrupted him. It was fine. Elena leaned against the desk. What happened before I went in? Well, Diego has been coming in every day trying to talk to Chance, but Chance is really mad at him for knocking up that girl, so they keep getting into it. It's actually kind of funny. Their meetings never last longer than 2 minutes. So I do what I call the countdown. Really? Oh, yeah. Her blonde ponytail bobbed up and down when she nodded her head excitedly. It never fails. You're so smart, babe. The beefcake sounded like he was just as brain-dead as she was. So, the man that rushed out of the office was Diego? Yeah, you didn't know that? He's the star of the team. I guess I didn't, she said with a sinking feeling as she handed Chelsea her hotel information and left. Elena wasn't going to be able to get within a few feet of Diego without fainting, much less work with him on a daily basis. Image consultants were meant to have close relationships with their clients. They managed nearly every aspect of their PR, including wardrobe and statements to the press. She even regulated her clients' mannerisms. She couldn't work with Diego on that kind of level. He was more animal than human. He would either eat her alive or tackle her, probably both. How was she going to be around him, much less fix him up? She wasn't sure she could handle any of the people she'd met. Elena was a simple woman whose life consisted solely of Netflix and quiet dinners. She liked things that were elegant and refined. She wasn't going to relate to these people and their over-exaggerated personas. They were too flamboyant and vulgar. Their lives revolved around their vices and base desires. There was no wholesomeness, no family or tradition. They lived the way they wanted to, with no regard to the consequences of their actions. Chapter 3. Elena wasn't looking to go to a red carpet event. She didn't have anything to wear, and even as an image consultant, she had no idea how things would be handled at the entrance. She went back to her suite, a 2-room with antique couches and a bed that Jesus must have made himself. She laid down and snuggled, letting the padding overtake her. She had to figure out what she was going to do. There would be a way to walk, a way to dress, and proper protocol for dealing with the press. She looked up everything from celebrity websites to etiquette, but the red carpet was a mysterious affair. Either you knew how to work it, or you didn't. At a loss, she called down to the front desk. "Hello," the woman answered in a thick Eastern European accent. "Yes, hi. My name is Elena in room 416. "One moment." The phone shuffled around and Elena thought she heard the sound of a woman shrieking. Fine, she's right here." The receptionist must have been covering up the receiver. "I'll send them right up, Miss Matthews." "Them?" Elena's phone beeped. She put the receptionist on speaker. She had a message from Chance saying that he was sending a tune-up crew down. "A tune-up crew?" "Your stylist, team, and designer. They just arrived." Chance was talking about her like she was a car. "Send them up." "Of course, Miss Matthews." With the usual pleasantries, the receptionist hung up the phone. In less than 5 minutes, Elena heard a brisk knock at the door and jumped up to answer. Move! Step aside." An Asian man wearing all black with dyed blonde hair winging down the side of his head pushed his way through with a series of clothes racks being towed by a group of women behind him. The girls stood them up against the wall and turned around to face Elena, who suddenly felt self-conscious. "Okay, girls," he said as he snapped his fingers behind his head. The 4 women walked up, dressed the same as the head of the pack. Each one had perfect blonde, wavy hair with a classic figure. "I'm Donovan," he said as he offered Elena his hand. As soon as she took it, he pulled her forward and ducked down to look her fingernails over. His face went sour. "I guess those will do. Come here." He pulled her forward and stopped her in front of the clothes rack. "These are couture. That means they're made to fit the model. They won't fit you properly, but it's all we have." "I know what couture is." "Yes. Now I'm thinking of a color." He walked to the front of a rack and started pushing the hangers aside, faster and faster until he stopped, jumped back and gasped, with his hand over his mouth. "Girls!" He buzzed them over. "Oh, it's fantastic, Donovan," one said. "A masterpiece," another girl mimed. "You are the fashion messiah." The last girl was trying to outdo the others. probably to gain Donovan's favor. He acted like he didn't even hear them and turned to Elena. Then he turned back to the dress, stroking his chin like he was trying to make a serious decision. It was a silver sequined evening gown with a lavender gradient at the bottom. It would work. So, you will wear this gown? I love it. Good. It's costing the team $4,000. Don't get it messed up. He snapped his fingers and girl number 1 opened a large trunk that took up the entire bottom half of one of the clothes racks. Inside, he kept the tools of his trade: scissors, razors, and 1,000 varieties of makeup brushes with a professional palette. He worked slowly, like a Renaissance painter trying to perfect every brush stroke. At one point, he took half an hour to perfect a curl that fell down the side of her face. When he was done, her mane of dark brown curls had been tamed into a messy bun, and her face shone like that of a porcelain doll. She reached up to touch her cheek, in awe of the face looking back at her. "What are you doing?" Donovan slapped her hand away. "Would you touch the Mona Lisa?" "I look amazing." He leaned against the bathroom counter in front of her. "Of course you do. You're a Donovan girl now." He reached in the back pocket of his leather jeans and pulled out a card. "You can contact me anytime you need me." Donovan handed her the card. It was a plain white card with simple gold lettering with Donovan inscribed on the front. "Thank you. We've still got to do your shoes. Sit down on the bed." He snapped his fingers, and girl number 3 nearly tipped over girl number 2 trying to grab another case. Now, he opened up the case, which transformed into a long shelf, showcasing a dozen pairs of shoes. He let his eyes rest on the strip of fading purple at the hem of her dress. Then he stared back at the shoe case, took his time, and finally chose a sparkling pair of royal blue shoes. "These," he said, speaking almost reverently of his selection. He placed them on her feet, stepped back, and squealed, "Fantastic!" The girls sounded off with seemingly heartfelt praise. Then he snapped his fingers, and they packed up and left as fast as they had arrived. She took a moment to inspect herself in the mirror, then jumped at another knock on the door. She rushed over to answer it. "Chance," she smiled. He was wearing royal blue jacket with expensive jeans and a white button-up. "I saw your style team leave, so I figured you would be ready." "Here," he said, reaching his hand out from behind his back. He offered her a single purple orchid wrapped in lavender tissue paper. "Thank you," she beamed, and set it in a vase on the coffee table. Then he took her arm and escorted her downstairs to the lobby. "Donovan really does wonders, doesn't he?" "He's a genius. I'm glad you sent him." "Are you kidding? I love the guy. He does my hair too, you know." They walked out into the sweaty evening air where a limo was waiting for them. There were spotlights waving through the ocean mist that were visible miles away from the event hall downtown. Elena had never seen anything like this event in person. They pulled up to the front of the building and waited in a line of cars while silicone models strutted down the carpet one by one, flipping their hair and teasing the small-time reporters cordoned off in front of the building. It was a meat market if she ever saw one, where the only thing that mattered was flesh and what little was covering it. It took nearly half an hour for them to begin moving up in the line. "Normally I bypass this stuff, but we've got to go down the carpet this time. My father's company is one of the major sponsors." "I'm your arm candy?" "For the moment. The stupid tabloids will label me as gay if I don't bring somebody. I hope you don't mind. I'll make sure people know we're not dating." They were waved to the front of the carpet by a guard dressed exactly like a member of the Secret Service. Then 2 men opened their doors and he whisked her through. The red carpet was a series of makeshift stands, complete with strategically placed cameras, corporate banner backdrops, and lights that nearly baked her alive. Every time they stopped in front of a stand, she had to smile, hold Chance's hand, and stare directly at the cameras. By the time she walked into the vast dining hall, Elena could barely see from the glare burned into the back of her eyes. What she did see was predictable: a large hall with covered tables set up in front of a stage. People were walking around holding champagne glasses while servers offered them appetizers. Over here. Chance could apparently see more clearly than she could, so he herded her to a small table sitting in the front corner. The rest of the tables had candle centerpieces and placemats. Hers was an uncovered school table with a bottle of vodka sitting in the center next to a cell phone. We had seating arranged months ago. Chance sat her down. We had to set up an impromptu place for you, but I'm right over there. He motioned towards a table near the back of the room. If you need anything, just let me know, okay? He was making her feel like the girl that got asked out to the prom as a joke. She turned back to the bottle of vodka and stared at it. It looked tempting, but she didn't know who it belonged to or why it was sitting there, so she restrained herself and stood up so she could hunt down an appetizer. Excuse me, miss. A woman with a thick East Coast accent called out from behind Elena. Elena walked up to a server a few feet away and grabbed a crab puff. Are you supposed to be eating the food? I thought you was working for us. Elena whipped around and locked eyes with a skinny Puerto Rican woman with frizzy black hair and long green fingernails to go along with her white dress. Elena had no idea how, but somehow the woman had managed to make it look good. Are you talking to me? You see any other frumpy bitches around here? I see a tacky stripper screaming at the top of her lungs. The woman got up slowly with a smile and flowed, rather than walked up to Elena. Without warming, she threw the champagne into Elena's face and walked back to her seat. Elena wasn't shocked, she was furious, but this woman wasn't going to get to her. She walked to the bathroom with dignity and cleaned herself off. When she walked back out, the room was dark, and a woman in a black dress was walking on stage wearing a seductive top made of peacock feathers and rhinestones. Thank you. Thank you. The crowd cheered when the woman walked up to the podium. She went on to list all of the various high-end corporate sponsors that were hosting the event, while Elena slowly walked through the crowd to get to her table. I just want to thank Ebony Smiles for all of their hard work. Elena took her seat, still staring at the stage. And I want to share with you some of the things they've done. She looked back to the left of stage, and a skinny young African boy walked out from behind the curtain. Elena caught a glimpse of a woman wearing a headset, motioning for him to smile. This is Abdul, a boy that lived in a small metal lean-to in the wetlands of Nigeria. When the Foundation found him, he was dying from starvation with no way to find food or clean water. Pfft. Elena looked down and nearly jumped out of her seat. Diego was sitting next to her, leaning close with the vodka bottle in his hand. He's some thug they picked up from the east side. The smell of his breath was enough to get her drunk. She was frozen still. I know the director. He spends all the donations on hookers and blow. Really? He laughed and took a swig. You're lying. He pounded the bottle on the table. Shit you not. He held his hands up. Come on. He grabbed her hand and pulled her up. Wait. She tried to get away from him, but she couldn't. His grip was too tight. Where are we going? He didn't answer. Instead, he dragged her out a side door into a courtyard outside of the building. There was a path leading to the beach. He took the last of the bottle and threw it on the ground where it shattered. She watched him, tortured and drunk. The man looked like he'd hit rock bottom. She was sympathetic, but also cautious and frightened by his behavior. He was an unpredictable creature, seething with rage. I know who you are. He turned on her. You're here so all the stupid shits in there will like me, but it's not gonna happen, because I'm not fake like they are. I'm a real person who's made real mistakes and hurt real people. But she, he pointed at the building, was not my mistake. I did her right. I believe you. No, you don't, he said as he swung around and got in Elena's face. You think I'm sick just like the rest of them, that I'd leave that bitch and her little baby alone with no money? He perked up and stood back, throwing his hands up in the air. But that's not me. No. He shook his head. I'm a good man. I would never do that. Elena didn't understand. He was supposed to be the typical douche. He should have been insisting that the kid wasn't his, and that he never cared about Maricela. But something else was going on here. Okay, what is the truth then? He looked her squarely in the eye, handed her a wadded-up piece of paper and said, "Figure it out," then walked away. Elena saw no point in staying at the event any longer. Diego was probably right. It was just a commercialized banquet with a show, and the whole thing was making her sick. She hunted down Chance, who was pretending to listen to the busty woman sitting next to him when she walked up. "Oh, hey." He had a smile like a game show host. "Hey, so I'm going to go. Is there a car service or should I make my own way?" "Ooh, I was planning on taking you back in the limo. I rented it out for the night, you know. Why don't you call a cab?" "Sure." She pulled out her phone and walked out to the courtyard. She wasn't thrilled to have to pay some guy $150 to give her a ride back to the hotel, but she didn't want to stay and wait for the limo either. Chapter 4. The wadded-up piece of paper that Diego had handed Elena was a cocktail napkin with an address written on it. When she looked it up online the next day, she found herself staring at a mansion with its own private beach and what looked like a swimming pool. It was his home address. He had been trying to get her to come and see him, but he was drunk and out of his mind. There would be no telling what he would be like the next day. He could have completely forgotten who she was and that he had given her his address. That was the most likely scenario. The man was so upset there was no way he would have stopped drinking after he left. He probably blacked out and woke up on the beach somewhere. Diego was on a good one, and Elena didn't want any part of it. But she had accepted this job as a last resort to revive her failing firm. She needed to do it, but she wasn't going to just show up at his house. That was not going to happen. Elena called Chance's office at the Big One Arena, and Chelsea answered. "Hello?" No greeting, just a vacuous reply. "Hi, this is Elena Matthews, Diego's image consultant." "Oh yeah, I remember you. Listen, Chance went home with a girl last night and he has a bad hangover, so I can't let you talk to him or else he'll get mad at me." "That's all right. I just need Diego's number." "Ooh, I'm not supposed to give that out. I'm sorry," she said as she hung up. Elena couldn't help but be reminded of a child that was just beginning to learn phone manners, one that was always hanging up at the wrong times. This team office was so disorganized and stupid that they couldn't even produce her client's number. She called back, but the receptionist picked up the phone and let it sit off the receiver. Elena could hear her talking to the blonde man that had been hitting on her yesterday. Elena threw her phone against the wall and the battery flew out of it. She really didn't want to show up at his door, but how else was she supposed to meet him if she couldn't even get his phone number? This wasn't okay. Elena thought of trying to call Chance directly, but something told her he would be just as uncooperative. She couldn't just wait around and hope to get paid. This was a media crisis, one that they would expect to be handled immediately. She had no other choice than to drive up to Diego's house. She rented a small SUV and wound through the city streets until she started heading north of the city where the road hugged the side of a sharp cliff. She was shaking, trying to maintain a decent speed and keep her eyes off the water while she drove up the narrow road. She could be in danger. Diego already didn't like her. He thought she was just like the rest of those fake people in the auditorium. He told her that she wanted to judge him, and she did. He was drunk and furious every time he'd seen her, and pacing around, looking like he wanted to bash somebody's head in. A man like that could kill a person for looking at him wrong. So, what would he do when she showed up at his house unannounced? She could find herself facing a shotgun or armed thugs ready to put her in a bag in the ocean. Who knew what he was involved with, or the kind of security a monster like him would have? She could have her calf bit off by a rabid dog, or find herself in the morgue. As the road narrowed, she descended higher up into the hills. The lava rocks on either side started getting sharper, contrasting against the sinister gray of the clouds rolling in off the coast. She might get caught in a downpour, and on a road like that, the consequences could be lethal. Eventually, the ground leveled out and changed from pebbles and sand to thick, even grass that stretched out for miles. The house was a white, towering affair, the kind found in Beverly Hills that had columns in the front and a wraparound driveway with a fountain. There was no security gate, though she did see several huts scattered around the perimeter. That gave her chills. If they saw her and didn't want her around, they could do anything, even shoot her. She drove carefully and parked at the edge of the driveway, trying to catch her breath. She looked down at her hands. She was visibly trembling because she had never been more scared in her entire life. When she got out of the car, she heard the sound of dog barking. A pit bull was racing towards her. "Ah!" She screamed and struggled to get the car door open. The dog was furious and had a jaw so big it looked like it could crush her skull without even trying. "Luther!" Diego ran up wearing nothing but a pair of sweats. "Jesus, the thing almost killed me." "Sorry," he laughed, and took a bite out of an apple he was holding. "I would have called, but the receptionist hung up on me when I asked for your number." "It's fine. I told you to come." He grabbed the thoroughly subdued dog by the collar and motioned for her to follow him into his house. He had a tapestry of tattoos, and they were real tattoos, not the basic stuff found on the walls of a tattoo parlor, or the Old English and cursive that was so common. His tattoos were amazing, custom-designed art commissioned just for him. There was a cloaked woman in black in the center of his back, with roses sitting at her feet and Celtic knots around the edges. He turned back to her when he was halfway there and smiled, letting her know that he knew she was looking at him. He threw the dog in, closed the door from the outside, and stood in front to bar her passage. "You don't want me to come inside?" "Nope." He shook his head. "Do you know why?" "No." "Why?" "Because you're judgmental." He strutted around in front of her, catching her eye. "You see this," he said as he motioned towards his tight chest and arms. "And you think thug. You automatically assume that I knocked Maricela up and that I play with women. I can't have that in my life. When you affect a certain demeanor? Damn you, lady. If you judge me, you can't help the media see who I really am. I am not putting up a facade. So before you come in my house, I want you to drop all of that judgmental, waspy bullshit that's going through your head." "I am not waspy." "You thought I was Satan the second you saw me." She held her arms against her chest. "Do you agree?" "Yeah." "Are you hungry?" He dropped his angry tone. "I guess." In truth, she was starving, but she wasn't sure what he'd have to offer. "Come on." He opened the door to a white modernistic palace. Everything was geometric shapes and harsh lines. The place was spotless but comfortable, with sectional couches and window seats. He was watching her reaction closely, almost self-consciously. Maybe he was trying to live down the stereotypes, or maybe he was trying to impress her. "What do you think?" "I like it. How long have you been living here?" 5 years. He turned around and walked into the kitchen. "When I first signed, I stayed with my parents and helped them renovate their house so they could sell it. I let them save the money and gave them enough to retire on. I did that for all of my family." He walked behind the counter. "I got everyone houses and cars, and made sure my sister had a college fund." "Was it too much of a stretch for you?" She sat down on a stool near the counter. "It was a sacrifice." He pulled out a pan and a bottle of olive oil. Then he started chopping garlic. "But I gotta think about everything my mom did for me and the sacrifices my father made so we could have a life. I can't just walk away from them." He turned around, scraped the garlic into the pan. The man clearly knew what he was doing as he poured eggs into the pan and added in different vegetables. He was right. He didn't need to be judged. This wasn't the same man she met yesterday. That man was angry and sullen, hardly capable of carrying on a conversation. "Why are you so upset? You don't seem like a drinker." "I'm not." He made her a plate and set out some fruit. Well, what is it? He pulled out his cell phone from his pocket. 2 months ago, this thing was ringing off the hook. Maricela sent text messages every few seconds, threatening me, my house, even Luther. Now she's trying to destroy my career. You broke her heart. No. He shook his head and poured them both some orange juice. That's the worst part. This woman decided to latch on to me and I wouldn't have it. I went on one date, then I told her off and now she's losing her mind. It was an old excuse and an easy lie for him to use. But she's alleging that she's pregnant, Diego. Look at this. He pulled up a video on his phone and hit play. There was the sound of somebody sobbing. Then Maricela's face came on screen. It was the woman that threw her drink on Elena at the charity dinner. She was sobbing with red eyes and mascara streaming down her face. You see this? She held up a knife and pressed it to her wrists. This is what you do to me, Diego. I love you. Baby, please. She was hysterical. Don't leave me. I'll be anything you want me to be. I love you, she shrieked. Then the video went blank. It looks like you broke the poor girl's heart. He laughed and swiped to another video. Look at this. You know what? Her face was clean and she was done crying. I don't even care. I'd never hurt myself over somebody like you. You're not worth it. She gave him the finger and ended the video. The woman is crazy. She sends me things like this all day, every day. Sometimes she's got a bottle of pills. Sometimes she's gonna run up here with a baseball bat. The team doesn't care. The only thing they're worried about is her going to the press. And they can't release videos like that, at least not directly. It will look bad on them for hiring a girl like her. Now I've got the short end of the stick, and everyone is blaming me. They don't care what I say. If she was lying, then they would have found out already. I'm not sure if I believe you. After what I just showed you, come on. I don't. She has ovaries that could quite possibly be functioning, and I'd put money on the fact that you gave it to her. That's just it. I didn't. I never even slept with her. She was too crazy. Elena couldn't believe that. He was lying. This was all a show, the cooking and the way he was acting. He probably stayed sober long enough to deal with her and planned on getting drunk later. Maybe he thought that convincing her would help him build a better image. Maybe he was mad at Maricela and was trying to hurt her by making everyone think she was faking the pregnancy. Elena wanted this man to be real. She had seen far too many sick, pasty douches pretending to be everything he seemed to be. They'd act like they could cook and keep house. They'd work out every few weeks trying to build some muscle. She dated men like that, but they never seemed to be able to keep up the image the way Diego did. Maybe he was everything they wanted to be, but it was probably too good to be true. You have to help me. He was reeling her in, walking closer until he was sitting in the stool next to her, facing her. I don't want to discredit this woman. If she's telling the truth and I hurt her, I won't be able to live with myself. Look, she just went to the media and started blabbing her mouth. She's not pregnant, and if people go out there and talk a bunch of crap about her, it's just going to make me look bad. I've been telling Chance this from the beginning. All you gotta do is try to get her to take a pregnancy test. She sat back and sighed. So you're telling the truth, aren't you? Of course. He sat down next to her. I'm losing my career here. Chance won't listen to me. When you got here, I had just told him to test her and he refused. He said that the team could get in trouble for making her do it. I stormed out and went to the bar thinking that my life was over. I worked for years trying to build what I have, and now I'm losing everything because a crazy woman is spreading lies about me. You don't have any idea what it takes to be where I am, do you? I don't. She shrank back a bit. He was too close and wearing nothing but his sweatpants. You don't like football. I knew it. It's dumb. What? You think we're just a bunch of monkeys throwing a ball around? Well, he laughed. When you're working out, you push yourself harder and harder until you can't take it anymore. then you have to keep going. Even though your body won't let you, you still have to find a way. That's where your mind kicks in, and you literally have to run out of sheer determination. Over time, that determination grows, just like a muscle. She nodded her head. Exercise is the art of self-growth. When you're running, your mind clears, and it starts running too. Running through all of the things that are going on in your life, all of your dreams and aspirations, and you start to work through them. All of the anger and tension that you build up throughout the day melts off, and you can be alone with your mind. It's like meditating. And sports? It's a way to strut your stuff so people can see how hard you've worked. It's a competition, sure, and a lot of people have a problem with that, but it encourages growth. Because you want to be better than the next guy. It motivates you, but when you get to the core of it, it's not about the next guy, or even the rest of the team. It's about bettering myself. He finished his food and his juice. Then he took her plate and washed the dishes. I did judge you. I know. He looked back with a grin. No, I mean, you're halfway across the country. The culture in OB is different. We're close to the border. The two worlds mix. It's not like a lot of the Midwest where minority groups are stuck in impoverished neighborhoods. So you got a little scared when you saw a tatted-up Mexican guy, right? That's not it. She was defensive. Yes, it is. You'd never admit it, not even to yourself, but that is it. You were angry, drunk, and looked at me like you wanted to bash my skull in when I first met you. And yeah, I guess a big tatted-up Mexican does evoke a certain bias. But I don't appreciate being called waspy either. Good point, I apologize. So do I. He finished the dishes and leaned across the counter. Would you like to see some more of the house? God, yes. Come on. He hooked his arm in hers and they walked out through French doors leading onto a veranda overlooking the ocean. This is what the art of self-growth has given me. Is that entire beach yours? Yes? It's beautiful. She could see the clouds rolling in from the coast, pouring rain onto the ocean. It's going to rain. Oh, that's the best time to be out here. He sat down on a square white cushion and sat her down beside him. See, when the rain comes, the tide rushes up and you can watch the waves, one after the other, getting bigger and bigger. It's a thrill. Do you ever go out in the water? Yes, I love swimming. I'll go out and catch fish, then bring them back and grill them. Oh, and the dolphins. Dolphins? Yes, he chuckled. So the dolphins love this part of the coast because they can come in and catch fish here too. There's a whole bunch. So I'll see them all the time jumping out of the water with fish in their mouths. But they're mean. I don't like to go near them. You never know what they're gonna do. You have dolphins in your backyard? Elena laid down on the cushion and stared up at the ceiling. Sure do. I have to apologize. I know I mentioned it before, but I can't stomach the thought of walking in and judging people like that. You're not a thug. You're not angry. You're harmless. No. He laid down and faced her, with his face inches away from hers. I'm dangerous. She couldn't stop shivering, and he couldn't stop looking at her. You are dangerous. Oh, to have somebody like him with his arms wrapped around her. I protect the people I care about. If anyone hurts somebody I love, and they do it bad enough, I'd kill them. That's a redeeming quality. Do you really think I'm just some stupid white girl? I like you, he chuckled. No, you don't. You think I'm dumb. No, I mean it, he reaffirmed. Most people would have gone crazy, walking out on the red carpet, smiling for the cameras and all that. They'd have been starstruck. You didn't care. Not at all. You walked right out and saw the whole thing for what it was. That might sound dumb to you, but you don't know my life. I haven't seen a woman that wasn't made of silicone in 10 years. Everyone here is fake, trying to get into your pants and your wallet. There's no substance here. It's a relief to meet you. You're a real woman. I feel that way too, you know. I mean about there being no substance here. That guy Chance, he knocks down all the girls before he hires them. If they don't do it, he won't hire them. If they do a good job on their quarterly review, he gives them a 20-cent raise. See, that's what I mean. No morals, just fake people. You're not fake, though. She went quiet. You've got no walls up at all. You are who you are, without apology. I can't pretend. I do what I do. He moved closer. And when there's something I want, he sat with his face hovering over hers. I take it. He fell slowly, with his top lip curled just right, and lit a fire that exploded over her lips and spread down her body. Then he pulled back. Was that okay? It didn't matter if it was okay for him to kiss her or not. She would have let him do it anyway, and when he was done, she would have begged for more. She had forgotten where was and what was going on around her. She had waited too long to answer, though. He sat up and held his head down low. There is somebody back home, but if that's the case, I won't do it again, and I'm sorry. His voice was dark. She couldn't end things like that, not after what had just happened. But I don't love him. We hate each other. She finally admitted it. For more than a year, she refused to admit that her relationship with Tripp was over, and it just rolled off her tongue like it was nothing. Do you want to leave him? Yes. Does he know? He doesn't care. Then is it okay that I kissed you? Dear God, yes. He bent down and kissed her again, not with the same tender kiss he had given her before. This was faster, rougher, and filled with the full force of his strength. He was like fire, eating into her face, spreading down her body and driving her insane. He burned so good the man could have done anything to her, and she would have let him. She was his, and she didn't have any choice in the matter, because he was just too irresistible. Elena laid with him, talking while they watched the rain as the waves edged up against the shore. Chapter 5. Elena walked into the arena wearing a black and white pantsuit, her hair in a tight bun. "Oh, hi!" Chelsea squealed. "Get Chance!" She didn't want to hear that woman's voice any longer than she had to. She twisted her finger over her lips. I think he's in a meeting or something. There was a lot of heavy panting earlier. Chance! She knocked on his door and it cracked open immediately. Just a second! He slammed the door shut again and muffled voices came from the other side. Are they hiring a new cheerleader? She asked Chelsea. I think Chance is doing interviews for when Maricela gets her baby bump. Is he? Elena hated that man. When he opened the door, he wasn't wearing any shoes and his shirt was buttoned up wrong. There was a young blonde woman leaning up against the desk. I need you to bring Maricela into the office, Elena said. He walked back to the desk and winked the girl. Then he picked up his tablet and started looking through it. I can get her in tomorrow, but I'm booked today. Just hurry up with him, she told the girl. I need Maricela in today. Chance, she turned to him. I'm going for coffee. Call me when she gets here. Elena wasn't about to wait in the office while he screwed that girl and finally got around to Maricela. Fine, he said, as he slammed the door on her and resumed his interview. Does he really screw all of the cheerleaders? Elena asked. Yep. He made me do it too, but I make more here than I did dancing, so I don't mind. How'd you find this job? He picked me up one night at the club, told me I had potential. Haven't gotten back on the pole since. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I love it here. Elena had never heard anything so terrible in her entire life. She was disgusted with the place, so she walked around downtown for a while, picked up something to eat, and sat down in a small cafe, where she did finally get a phone call from Chance. Is she there? Elena asked. Yeah, and she's pissed. Apparently she had some sort of spa thing going on and we interrupted it. Good. Are you screwing Diego? Why? She keeps going on about it. She seems to think that because she saw you sitting with him at the charity event that you're with him. No, and she assaulted me at the event. The woman is psychotic. Have you seen the videos she sent Diego? Oh yeah, that's some crazy shit, ain't it? Don't take anything she says seriously and get her in a room so I can talk to her. She hung up the phone and walked out of the cafe carrying a white plastic bag. When the elevator opened and Elena started to walk out into the reception area, she heard a shrill scream and was tackled to the ground, engulfed in a sea of frizzy black hair. "He's mine," Maricela shrieked. She pulled Elena up by the hair and slammed her head to the ground. "Mine!" She did it again. "He loves me, we're having a baby, and we're going to be together." The third time Elena's head slammed to the ground, she felt light. Maricela reared up and drew her fist back to punch Elena in the nose. Elena dodged to the right and threw Maricela off of her. The woman's head made a thud when it hit the concrete. "Chance!" Elena rushed up to bang on his door. "She wanted to wait for you," he called from his office. "Uh-huh, yeah." Chelsea was on the phone. "She's the frumpy brunette with crazy hair fighting in the lobby. I need you down here right away." "Frumpy?" Maricela shrieked. "Security will take care of her," Chelsea whispered to Elena. Two men ran out of the elevator, their hands hovering over their tasers. "Is this her?" It was the blonde that was always flirting with Chelsea. "Yeah, baby, get her!" She hopped up and down. "Could you, tase her for me?" Elena asked. Maricela spit in her direction. "Sorry, we're not really allowed to use them unless we have to," the blonde said. "Not even for me, Jeff." "Sorry, babe." Looking to Elena, he asked, "What do you want me to do?" "Bring her into this side room here." Elena pointed to the door of a conference room on the other side of the reception desk. "Stay with me, please." Elena walked up to Maricela, who was staring at her like a snake ready to devour its victim. Then she crouched down to the woman's level. "I think we'll have a little chat, woman to woman." "I'm going to kill you," Maricela stared at her dead on. "Try it." Elena stood up and turned back around to walk into the conference room. "Let me go," Elena heard from her spot at the head of the table. "Get off me! What are you doing? Please!" Maricela was hysterical when the men pulled her up to the door and threw her into the room. Her face made a satisfying smacking sound on the floor when it made contact. She shot up, shrieking, with her claws out in front of her and ran towards Elena. "You bite..." The blonde security guard came up behind her, picked her up, and sat her down in the chair on the other side of the table. "I have zip ties," he yelled, struggling to be heard over Maricela's shrieking. "Both of you just stand on either side of the chair," she directed the security detail, appearing much more calm and in control than she felt. "Now," Elena turned her attention to Maricela. "I don't know you, but I know you're out of your mind. Those videos... I love him, and that's something you know nothing about." She was sobbing like a little girl now, a complete change from the shrieking witch of moments ago. "Okay, whatever. You're jealous and you're trying to destroy him because he never wanted to be with you in the first place." "That's not true." She struggled to get up, but the blonde managed to sit her back down. "Prove it then." Elena set her phone down in her lap and pulled a box out of the plastic bag she'd been carrying. "Take a pregnancy test. He has reassured me and everyone else consistently that if you are pregnant, he will make sure the baby is taken care of." She clicked her tongue. "What? You want me to just squat right here?" "There's a bathroom down the hall. You can take all the time you want." Maricela went from indignant to quiet. "If you're telling the truth, Maricela, you can have everything you want. You just have to take this test." Elena walked over to her and crouched down with her phone in her hand. "You don't want to take the test, do you?" "I don't have to do nothing for you." "Why won't you take the test?" Elena asked. "I know about you. I saw you with him at the party, running out with him holding a bottle. I will never do anything you say." "Then you're not pregnant. If you were pregnant, you would take the test." "I'm not taking it," Elena set the pregnancy test on the table. Prove it, Maricela. If you want to keep this up, you need evidence, because you better believe that in 9 months when there's no baby, the entire country will be laughing at you. Then she turned and walked out. Chapter 6. Diego sent Elena a text when she was halfway to her hotel. All it said was 7 p.m. He wanted her to come by his house, not so she could get to know him or so he could talk with her. This was a date, with a man that could melt her every time she laid eyes on him. She checked herself in the mirror when she pulled into the parking garage. There were lines under her eyes, and her hair was about to burst out of her hair tie. She walked back up to her room. How could she possibly go on a date looking like this? She didn't have anything to wear. The dress from the event had to be returned. What about her face? She looked in the bathroom mirror. Ugh, this wouldn't work. Diego might have said he wanted a real woman, but no man could handle a woman in her natural state. Elena had enough to buy an outfit and maybe some decent makeup without blowing her budget, but she didn't have any time. It was already 4 o'clock, and it took almost an hour to drive up to the mansion. Elena couldn't miss spending time with Diego even if she wanted to. He had too much control over her. The second she resolved to cancel, she'd end up running to her car to drive straight to his mansion. The only choice she had was the kind of impression she wanted to give him. She could walk up with no makeup and a pair of old jeans, or she could attempt to be the kind of woman he couldn't resist. Elena pulled out her laptop, and it opened up to her profile.
Donovan. The man was a genius. He would fix this. It would cost an arm and a leg, but the man would make her look like a goddess. She hunted him down and sent a message detailing the entire situation. She had barely hit send when her phone started ringing.
Hello? Diego Rojas, Donovan shrieked on the other end. You did not just tell me that you have a date with Diego Rojas. Yes. Whoo! He hung up and texted her an address. Elena freshened up, ran out the door, and soon found herself standing in front of a beach house painted bright gold. Sitting in front was a golden sign with the same signature as on Donovan's cards. Now, Elena heard Donovan scream. Yes, Donovan. Go. The third girl's butt poked out the screen door. Elena walked forward to see what was going on and laughed when she realized the girl had been bowing to Donovan. I am so sorry. She turned around and ran down the front steps to meet Elena. I didn't mean to keep you waiting. It's okay. Elena followed her up the steps where she was met by a limp figure leaning against the doorframe smoking a cigarette. You're lucky, Donovan said. I'm feeling sexy. He flipped his cigarette off the porch, turned around, and walked inside. Elena followed him in. He had gutted the whole place and had mirrors covering every wall. The effect was jarring, like she was being confronted with all of her flaws, in a freaky house of mirrors kind of way. Her chin was too small, and she had love handles sticking out on both sides. She wanted to look away, but everywhere she looked, she found another viewpoint, another flaw. What do you think? Donovan studied her. Of this place? You don't like it? No, Sit down, he interrupted, pointing to a shampoo station in the corner and dragging her over. Then he pushed her head down and started bombarding her with a burst of scalding hot water. You're not supposed to like it. The mirrors make you see just how ugly you are. Everyone is ugly, but most people don't get good a look. Once they do, they want to change. A mirror makes you a better person. You want to change? He added a squirt of shampoo to his hand. Of course you do. You need a mirror in your head too. I tell everyone, watch yourself. You think you know who you are? Then somebody puts a mirror up to you and you'll surprise yourself. I like that. Good. He pushed her up and pulled her by the hand into a stylist chair and began weaving her hair and buzzing the girls over for his tools of the trade. He did her hair up in a messy bun like before, only he left a strand hanging near her eyes. He snapped his fingers so the girls could sound off their praises. Come. He walked her into a back room where she found an array of clothes that would rival any collection. You know why I have the girls? He flipped through a rack of dresses. No. They let me know when I'm not doing my best. They all have tells when they lie. Number 1 blinks too much. Number 2 licks her lips. And of course, number 3 stutters. They idolize you. It's all social engineering, darling. Social engineering, Elena repeated, amazed, and sat down on a bench in the back of the room. She might have misjudged the man. He was crazy and worshipped everything shallow, but even in that vapid space there was a touch of the profound. You do a lot of work for the team. I've dressed all the girls. Maricela was the only one I refused. Why? She screamed at me. He turned around with serious glare. Nobody screams at Donovan. She attacked me today. I knew she would. She's been wondering about you since they hired you. You be careful with her. He switched to another rack, pulled out another dress, and looked back at her. Come here, up. She got up so he could hold the dress out. Good. Go change. She took the dress and walked back into the bathroom to change. When she walked out, the girls sounded off and Donovan gave her a spritz of perfume. Marvelous. He kissed her on the cheek and sent her away. Chapter 7. Elena drove up 10 minutes late and stepped out of the car with the slit of her bright red dress exposing her lower thigh. She was the archetypal nightclub singer, a model of sensuality, mystery, and beauty. Pheromones were dripping from her body, mixing with the scent of gold and amber from Donovan's perfume. When she walked up to the porch, the door swung open and Diego's silhouette appeared out of the candlelight. You look wonderful. He grabbed her hand and led her inside. Then he wrapped his arm around her waist. You got all dressed up for me. I've been meaning to see Donovan. Thought this would be a chance to dress up. I like it. He stopped, stepped back, and gave her a menacing grin while he looked her over, taking in every facet of her form. She couldn't believe that she was being appreciated by a man as gorgeous as he was. Wine? He asked as he led her out onto the veranda. Grabbing a glass, he tipped it while he poured the wine in. Sure, I have something for you too. He chuckled and handed her the glass. Then he met her eyes with a long and intense look. She blushed and reached into her bra to pull out her cell phone. She tapped to the recording and pressed play. Maricela's shrill East Coast accent roared out of the speaker, saying that she wouldn't take the pregnancy test. When they'd both clearly had enough, Elena pressed stop. If I hand this off to the right people, you'll be off the hot seat and the media will move on to something else. What happened? He paced around while she recounted the whole story. She attacked you? Right in front of Chance. How did he let that happen? She's done. If she won't take the test, it casts a shadow of doubt on the whole thing. No, she's too dangerous, and she won't just go away. Get Chelsea to tell the police what happened, and I'll turn over the videos she's been sending me. If she's getting violent, then she's escalating. She could be dangerous. I shouldn't have brought it up. Elena took a drink of wine. Let's forget it for now. It adds too much tension. I just want this night with you. But what if she does something terrible? He sat down and held his head in his hands. You don't know this woman, Elena. She's up and down, crying and laughing. She even had a Santeria altar set up in her house dedicated to killing me. How do you know? He pulled out his phone and showed her a picture of an array of candles and a bowl of what looked like blood. Holy crap. I want her gone. That we can do. 3 people saw what happened. Chance heard the whole thing. There are plenty of witnesses that will back me up when I go to the police. Chance won't put her in jail. I've shown him all the videos and told him about the things she's done. He said that if I put her in jail, they'll have my contract terminated. What? Why? Because she's such a big star. The only way they'll let it happen is if they can't afford to keep her on the team. The videos would have been enough had she not lied about being pregnant. Now she's got too many people on her side. You have to release the tape before you send her to jail. And you have to do both quick, because you're going to want her behind bars when she finds out what you did. She's already losing it. That's what's got me worried. You're safe here, aren't you? Elena asked. Yes, but what about you? I don't know. Stay the night. He sat down next her, placing an unexpected expectation on her shoulders. She didn't say thing, or even move. She didn't know what to think. I don't mean... Of course, I mean, I'll stay. Good. He laid down on the cushion and pulled her into his arms. Then he tilted her chin up. I don't want anything to happen to you. I like you. He could be rough and tender all at once. I like you too. He kissed her and wrapped his arm around her back. She did want him. He could have had her any time he wanted. He must have known. But he wasn't taking advantage of it. He wasn't pressing her forward or playing with her bra strap and grabbing her butt. He was just enjoying the kiss. He pulled back, and with wide, innocent eyes and smiling like only a young lover could, he asked, Are you hungry? I could eat. Good. He stood up and took her hand to lead her down the steps of the veranda onto the beach, where he'd set up a table surrounded by a ring of candles and white petals. He'd done everything he could to make it romantic. It's not too much, is it? He sat down and straightened his napkin in his lap. You're self-conscious. No, I'm not. He blushed. You are, but that's a good thing. It means that you care about what I think, that you really do like me. I do. I don't want you to think that I just want to sleep with you or that I'm some shallow idiot going for a girl he just met. I don't think that at all. I want to try this. You're different from any other guy I've dated. My boyfriends have all been the aspiring country club types, with good jobs and a clean-cut appearance. Guys that I thought were good, solid men, but it never seemed to work out. They were just better at hiding their vices, and they knew how to lie. Men like that hide themselves behind their fancy cars and designer clothes. Then they push down all their urges, and eventually they come exploding out all at once. Nobody can keep that life up. That's why I'm honest. I tell people what I want. One thing I could say about my last boyfriend is that he never cheated. He was just bored. We'd go out to dinner the same day every week and talk about our days. Then we'd go back and watch a movie. We haven't done anything different than that for months. The worst part was that when we'd go to dinner, he'd never listen to a word I said. He wouldn't even look at me. He was a cheater. Diego took a sip. Even if he didn't cheat on you with another woman, his focus was elsewhere, and that's just as bad. He was still unfaithful. Elena smiled. You're right. I never thought of it like that. She watched the water move back and forth, while he did the same, and they both looked back at each other from time to time. For you, miss. A man wearing a white suit set a covered platter down in front of her. Then he opened it up to reveal a steak with potatoes and rice, covered in truffles and a thick, dark sauce. Thank you, she told the man. When he walked away, she asked, How did he know when to come? Diego held up his phone. I manage everything here with this. That way I don't have to deal with the staff directly when I'm busy. That's genius. And this food. Truffles? Aren't these one of the most expensive things on the planet? Yeah, but I love them. She took a bite and savored the rich, nutty flavor. They are divine. Thank you. They ate in silence, watching the water and one another. When they finished, Diego set a blanket out on the sand, and they finished their champagne while Diego held her. She didn't feel like she had to say anything. Diego was enough for her, and he seemed to feel the same way. Chapter 8. Elena's biggest worry was that she'd end up in bed with Diego, and that she'd never be able to come back from it. She would have gotten drunk on him, and if he walked away, she never would have been able to recover. But nothing happened. They just held each other on the beach until they both got tired. There was not any pressure that night. He didn't even ask her if she wanted to be with him. In fact, he seemed to have anticipated her desire to take things slow, and made all of the considerations he could to ensure that she would feel comfortable. But she wasn't comfortable, because when the servant took her to her room, they had to separate. He was on the second floor while she was on the first, and it felt like there were light years between them. What was the point of ending the night like that when she could still be in his arms? She needed to be with him and decided she wouldn't allow herself to make the same mistake again. Elena couldn't be without Diego. Her relationship had taken over everything else. She was starting to understand what she wanted out of life. She thought she wanted somebody to sit next to her on the couch and raise a family with, and that Tripp was the kind of man that could do that for her. But she was wrong. That life would have bored her to death, and a man like Tripp wasn't reliable. He was barely present, even when he was right there. She needed more. Diego's allure wasn't just his predatory stare or his beastly form. It was the thrill that he gave her. Elena was addicted to it. Every time he kissed her, it was like jumping out of an airplane. She was safe, yet she still felt like she was in danger, and there was no way that she could shake that feeling. It was a good thing and a bad thing. Ultimately, it could be lethal. She could get hurt. He could walk away, and if he did, she'd lose everything. It felt like she was risking her life, but she couldn't stop herself. The next morning, Elena tiptoed out of her bedroom and up the stairs towards Diego's room. She laid down on the bed beside him and laid her head on his shoulder. "Hey, what are you doing?" And then, he let the predator inside him loose. Chapter 9. Diego had a way of getting to Elena and touching the right buttons at all the wrong times. He growled softly and bit her neck while they walked down the hall towards the elevator that led to the reception area. "Stop, Diego." "Ah, come on." They walked into the elevator and he pinned her to the wall. "No, His lips crashed into hers like a boiling tidal wave, and she gave in. She would always give in to him. "Oh my God!" Chelsea shrieked. Elena looked back in horror to see the elevator door standing open and Elena staring at them with her hand covering her mouth. Like, "You guys are totally about to do it." Diego dropped Elena and dashed to the counter. "If Maricela finds out..." "She won't hear it from me," Chelsea said. "I hate that little witch. She tried to steal Jeff from me." Elena walked up, embarrassed. "And besides, I like Elena." "Thank you." Elena felt terrible, judging the girl the way she had. Chelsea might have a high-pitched foghorn for a voice, but at least she had Elena's back. "I like you too." "Chance is gonna hate me for sending you in. He's having private time on his computer." "Does he do anything else?" Elena asked. "He drinks," Chelsea replied with a smile. Diego walked up to Chance's door. Then Chelsea's phone rang. "Hello?" Diego stuck his ear to the door. "What kind of a situation?" Chelsea asked. Diego turned a bright color of red, threw the door open, and ran into the office. "What do you mean she went to the courts?" Elena rushed in after him and found Chance shrinking back in his chair while a fuming Diego loomed over him. "She got a couple of the Hawk ladies to do a press conference and say that you harassed them. Now her lawyer's on the other line. If you could please..." "I can prove she's lying, Chance." Elena walked up. "I don't have time for this. I've got people banging down my door, lawyers on 3 lines, and the girls are coming in less than an hour." "I don't care." Elena slammed her phone on the desk. "I've got her on record refusing to take a pregnancy test. Release it to the media." "And these..." Diego pulled out his phone and started swiping through the crazy images of Maricela. "We could just cut your contract," Chance told him. "You think you've got lawyer troubles now? Mess with Diego's contract and you'll take a hit like you've never seen," Elena countered. "We're going to the police." Chelsea moved in behind them and marched up with Jeff in tow. "She attacked Elena," Jeff said, "and we'll all testify to it." "And you're going to keep him on as well," Elena said, smiling at Chelsea. Chance looked at all of them. He was cornered with his chair against the wall and his hands folded. It looked like helping Diego was the last thing he wanted to do. It didn't make any sense. He had no reason to back up the girls. They had no proof. Anything they said was libel. They were destroying the public relations integrity of the team and the Hawk ladies. Elena decided that it must be something personal between the two men. Diego was looking at the man like he wanted to slit his throat. The tension between them was a deadly force, one that Elena didn't understand. "We've got assault, libel, slander, and harassment," Elena said. "And if you destroy your top player, you're not going to make it this season." Chance waited while everyone stared him down. Then he said, "All of you get out now." "What?" Diego slammed his fist on the desk and walked around it to face the man. "Diego, let's go." Elena walked up behind him and pulled on his sleeve. Diego didn't move. He stared Chance down, the veins in his neck bulging. Then he backed off and stormed out. Elena, Chelsea, and Jeff on his heels. "Thank you for that, Chelsea." "Of course. I told you I like you. I'm not letting those girls hurt either of you. Most of them are just doing it because Diego wouldn't sleep with them. They're all lying." Diego was fuming and pacing around the room. Elena walked up to him. "Diego, why is Chance acting like this? It's completely irrational." "It doesn't matter." Before she could respond, Chance's door opened. "Diego, get in here." Diego was fast to respond. He walked in like a bear ready to rip Chance's head off. Elena followed, but Chance cut her off at the door. "Team business." Chance slammed it shut and walked inside. Elena put her ear to the door and heard the sound of his chair scraping against the floor. "Now, I don't like you. You're lucky I didn't fire you when it happened." "I don't know what you're talking about." Chance laughed. "I don't care. I don't care what happens to this team. I don't care what happened with you and Maricela. I believe you. The bitch is crazy, but it doesn't matter, because this is my chance to finally get you off this team." "All right!" There was a crashing sound and Elena ran into the room. "Diego, no!" He was on top of Chance, who was whimpering on the ground with the broken desk at his side. Diego had his arm raised. "Get out, Elena." Diego turned back to her. He was going to kill Chance. "No." Elena stood her ground. She wasn't afraid of him. "Get out!" "No!" She walked forward, trembling. He could hurt her, but he wasn't going to. She put her hand on his shoulder. "Diego, you don't need him or this team. I worked my entire life for this. And if you hurt him, you'll lose it all. He'll go to the police and you'll end up in prison." Diego looked back at Chance. Please," he said, practically whimpering. "Shut up, Chance." Elena walked over and kicked him right in the face. Then Diego took her hand, and they left. Chapter 10. When they stepped into the dingy, low-lit convenience store, the sand on the floor scraped against their shoes. The guy behind the counter, a ratty old man with a baseball cap, spit a wad of chew out onto the floor. "I'll take a fifth of JD." Diego walked up to him. "And a pack of Newports," Elena said. "No." Diego turned back to her. "I think I can have at least one pack in 10 years. It's not going to kill me." "A pack of Newports," Diego told the man who already had the bottle on the counter. He turned around, handed Elena the cigarettes, and rang them up. They walked back to a series of wooden steps and onto the beach, where Diego led her to a small, private area where they could sit and lean against the rocks. He grabbed the bottle, opened it, and took a chug. Then he passed it to Elena, who had no intention of touching the thing, considering the look on his face when the brown liquor went down hard. "You could try to get a contract with one of the other teams. You're a star player. Someone will hire you." "OB is my home. It's where my family and all of my friends are. I can't leave here. I wouldn't be able to see my mom or my dad, and they're getting older. They're going to need me." "Well, then what are you going to do?" "I'm done." Even if I did try out for one of the other teams, it wouldn't be the same. I'd be the second-hand player that nobody wanted. Players are political figures, just as much as they are football players. If a team picks up somebody with a bad history, they keep him as quiet as they can. They won't pass me the ball or give me a place in front of the cameras, and most of them wouldn't take me. Not the teams that matter. I'd have to play on a losing team and they'd take most of my pay. No matter what, I'll lose my house, my cars, and all of the money I have. There's always a way, Diego. Especially for somebody with the kind of money you have. No, there isn't. He took a huge hit of whiskey. His face was already red and sweaty. I'm going to lose everything, Elena. And when I do, all I'll have left is this. He took another swig. What do you mean? I mean, once things start getting bad, I'm gonna drink. But I'll still be here for you. She took his hand and he wrenched it away. Hey. She put her hand on his shoulder and he went still. I would never leave you, not for any reason. And I don't believe for 1 second that you're going to lose everything. You don't know me like that. He whipped around. You don't know how many years I've put into this. I know what it means to you. No? He shook his head. You don't know shit. And when things really get bad, and I'm waking up every morning drinking like this, you're gonna want to leave. I'm not leaving, Elena said. I'm staying right here. I think, he began quietly, that you need to. Her face went white and tears welled up in her eyes. Don't do this. I don't got any other choice. He held his head low. The last thing I want to do is hurt you, but I'ma do it no matter what I do. You met me at my best when I had everything. You don't want to see me at my worst. You'd never hurt me. I'd lose control. Too much liquor and all this hatred. I'll turn into a monster. He turned around. And I don't want to see you in pain. I'd rather kill myself. You're being short-sighted. Do you know what happens when you get too much liquor in a man, Elena? He hurts the people he loves. I don't believe that. Not you. Oh, yeah. He picked up the bottle. You want me to drink all of this so you can find out? You think I'm dangerous now? You know when you ran in there when I was on top of Chance? If I was drunk, I wouldn't have held back. I would have bashed his head in. You're not a monster, Diego. He stood up, took my hand, and helped me up. Then he stood back with his eyes glazed over and looked me dead on. We're done, Elena. You bet we are. I get a damn say in the matter, don't it? Nope, you're drunk. You're damn right I am. And I'm going to be drunk for years, because I've lost everything, and I will never put a woman through that, especially one as good as you. I sobbed. Diego, I rushed forward to embrace him, but he stopped me. I just needed to feel him and let him know that he didn't have to be alone, but he had his mind set on this. How do I get through to you? He turned around. I'm not gonna budge. How could you not? Don't you care about me at all? That's why I'm doing this. He ran away, and she struggled to follow. Her feet dug into the sand, and the faster she tried to run, the farther they dug. She hit her feet on a rock and fell down face first, taking a mouthful of sand. She didn't want to get back up, because she didn't want anyone seeing her cry, but she couldn't breathe, so she sat up, spitting sand out of her mouth. Brushing it off her face, she sat at the edge of the tide line, bawling and screaming. If he cared about her, he wouldn't do this to her. He'd stay by her no matter what. He'd understand how much he loved her. He wouldn't leave her there like this. He'd pick her up and bring her back and tell her he was sorry, but that wasn't going to happen. She stood up and started walking back to where they'd been sitting. He was laying on the ground with the empty bottle caught in the waves with his eyes closed. He looked almost peaceful. Maybe he was just drunk. Maybe he'd understand. She just needed to be close to him. That was all that mattered. So she laid down next to him in the sand, and he turned over. So she wrapped her arm around him and moved closer so that their bodies were touching. He took her hand and held it, giving her the relief she needed to fall asleep. Something shifted. She felt him turn around and run his fingers through her hair. Then he kissed her, letting his lips linger, warming her from the soft chill coming off the ocean. She opened her eyes and found him staring at her. "I want to be with you, Elena." "You do?" "Of course I do. I need to, but I can't." It was still going to happen. He was never going to be with her again. "I can't live without you, Diego." She sat up. Please don't do this to me." He didn't answer. Instead, he got up and brushed himself off with his back turned to her. Then he helped her up and brought her back to the car. She kept her eyes averted the entire way. Neither of them said anything. The only sound was his heavy breathing. She did look back right before they turned into the parking lot. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight they were white. When they stopped, all the pressure of the moment exploded. "You don't give a shit about me. If you did, you wouldn't be doing this." He reached over her and opened her door, motioning for her to get out. Chapter 11. Elena found her bed and didn't leave her room for more than 2 days. She couldn't. She had a man that cared about her, that could have showed her the world, and now he didn't want her. He didn't even have a good reason for leaving her. Elena knew what he was trying to say, that he didn't want her to see him lose his house and all of his money, and that he'd end up drinking and going into a deep depression. But she didn't care, because she didn't want to lose him. After leaving Tripp and emptying her house out, Diego was all she had. It seemed her career was in the tank, especially now, and if she had to walk away from him, she'd have to start all over again. Besides, there were legitimate things they could do to stop the girls from ruining his career, or at least get something out of this whole fiasco. They could call the police and send Maricela to jail. He could sue the team. He didn't have to give up. But he was giving up on her career and on her. Elena kept the covers over her head and closed her eyes as much as she could. She didn't want to see the light or have to look out the window, because she knew that if she did, she would be reminded of the fact that she was living in a world without Diego. On the 3rd day, she woke up at 5 in the morning and ordered room service. She didn't want to eat or spend the money, but she needed something. She was so hungry that her stomach was threatening to cave in, and regardless of how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore that basic instinct. When the food came, it was greasy and cheap. There was too much, and it just reminded her of the beautiful dinner he served her out on the beach. She ended up eating a few bites and letting the rest rot while she cried. That was the first time she actually cried about it. It didn't feel right. Crying was something people did for relief. It relieved the tension, but she didn't want to feel better. She wanted it to hurt, because the better she felt, the closer she got to getting over Diego. Elena laid back down, closed her eyes and tried to retreat into the darkness, but she couldn't sleep and the vibrating sound wouldn't stop. She didn't want to get up, but she did. She reached for her phone sitting on the coffee table and answered it. "What?" "Hi, I'm trying to reach Elena Matthews." It was a businesswoman. "This is she." "Hi, Elena. My name is Francine Hopkins, and I'm calling on behalf of George Marcus, the owner of the Ocean Hawks." "Yes?" She sat down on the couch. "He'd like to thank you for your assistance with the issue involving Maricela, and to apologize for the way his son Chance treated you." "Really?" She jumped up. "Chance is no longer with us, and we need somebody to take the position as head of PR. If you'd like, you can come in and sign the paperwork this afternoon." "What about Diego?" "His contract will continue as planned. I'll be there in less than an hour." When Elena got there, Francine, a flawless blonde with perfectly straight hair, whisked Elena to her office, and they took hours, forcing her to sign document after document of meaningless crap. She didn't read a word of it. They rushed her too quickly. All she could think about was finding Diego as soon as she could. Elena was shivering in the cold sea air when she walked up to Diego's mansion, unsure of how she would be received. She didn't want anything but the man that she loved holding her in his arms. She loved him. She hadn't known whether or not she did, until she had seen him in the car outside the hotel and he put her out of his life and broke her heart. She had to lose him to know for certain. Now she was putting herself on the line, walking up to his porch with her arms crossed, shivering. They didn't tell him yet, at least she didn't think so. She only left the arena half an hour ago, and they were so busy with her that they said they might not get to him until the morning. So he would probably want her to leave. He might not let her tell him what happened. Maybe he would be drunk and belligerent again. He might not even answer the door. She knocked anyway and waited. Nothing happened. There were no footsteps or voices. So she knocked again and waited. Nothing. Elena could walk back to her car and wait. Maybe when they told him he would call her, but he might not. He broke up with her. He might want to move on. Maybe he'd get scared and things would get weird. Too many things could go wrong. So Elena waited and knocked again. Nothing. She turned around to walk away. Then the sound of the door creaking open stopped her. His face was red and puffy, but his eyes were sharp. He was sober, but he was still upset. They looked at one another, and the tension passed between them. That's when she saw the remorse in his eyes, and she knew he didn't want to break up with her before. He did it for her sake. Diego, He picked her up in his arms and carried her out onto the cushion outside on the veranda. She got a peek at the rain coming in from the coast. Then she lost herself, his kisses raining down on her, enveloping her in sweet moisture that wrapped around her when he pulled her up. I love you, Elena, but I don't know how things are going to turn out. Without football, I'm nothing. The owner's secretary called me this morning. He fired Chance, brought you back, and now he's hiring me to be the head of PR. Jesus, he jolted back. Then he kissed her and hopped up off the cushion. You're gonna live here. I am. And we're gonna be together. We are. Woo! He howled in excitement.
This is an exclusive production of the Romance Fiction Club. We hope you had a good time listening. Please like and subscribe so that we can continue creating free content for you to enjoy. Check out our library for more exciting romance stories. Thank you and have a wonderful day. See you soon. Bye-bye.